Welcome back to the Junto with Scott Rattigan. I'm your host, Scott Rattigan, and we bring in experts from all around the different types of industries that are supportive of you, the entrepreneur, in this functional medicine space. And today I'm very excited because this is one of the main reasons I started this show, is to have mindset experts come in, and we have Dr. Kirstin Lauritzen, who is a chiropractor and now a performance coach for women, especially executive women. And so in today's episode, we go into mindset and beliefs that play a crucial role in creating the life we want, but really how that also affects our physical body and how our brain affects our body, as well as shifting mindsets around money and worth and how that affects us as entrepreneurs. I think all of us go through that struggle at least once. And stick around because she has a course. We didn't get to it on the recording, but she told me afterwards that she has a course for the concept of feeling worthy of charging the correct prices for you, and it's under $100. So stick around for that information. But let's get right into Dr. Lauritzen, and I'm so happy to have her and present her to you guys, and I know you'll enjoy this one. Dr. Kirstin Lauritzen is a performance coach for high-achieving women. She supports women in creating a positive mindset and resiliency through their health and well-being. She earned her doctorate in chiropractic and continued with her passion for health, getting her master's in human nutrition and functional medicine. She believes taking a truly holistic approach to the body is vital for creating optimal health, and we have the power to create anything we want in our life. I'm excited to dig into that. She's the founder and owner of Northwest Functional Medicine and drkirstin.com, drkirstin.com. Welcome, Dr. Kirstin.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm very excited about today's call because I know you're very well-versed in all of these things, especially the power to create anything we want in our life. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so what I'm referencing there is really looking at how our mindset and our mind is guiding our experience. So we'll get into this, but basically, like the most fun way I'd say to like think about it is that we have filters. Again, I'll get into all of it, but like we have filters for what we're looking for in our life. And like if you've ever been in a scenario where you've like wanted to buy, let's say, a particular car, and once you finally decide on what it is that you want, then all of a sudden you see it everywhere. And that's because you told your brain like, oh, I want that thing, so I want to focus more on that, give me more evidence for what that thing is, and then you see it. And so then we can apply that same principle to the things that we want to create in our life, meaning that we can quite literally design what we want. So that's what I mean by that. And we will go into that. It can be health, it can be wealth, it can be like business specific things. It can be even like the way that we experience like our relationships, or like creating the relationship that we want, the motherhood that we want, parenthood, fatherhood that we want. All of those things are ways that we can use our subconscious mind to really create the life that we want it to be. So
all right, what a good teaser for later on. I'm going to want to ask you a million questions about it now, but how did you start exploring that, or how did you get into what you're doing now, which, you know, we talked about chiropractic and the nutrition background, but then also now we're talking about brain alignment and helping women, get to the root of burnout and overwhelm as well. So how did you get into all this?
Yeah, so I know this is also geared around functional medicine in the sense of how we got connected anyway. But I grew up with a couple of different conditions. I had endometriosis, I had migraines. I also took a bunch of antibiotics. It's after exploring a whole lot of different options for gut or for acne and things that were being caused by diet, hormones, lifestyle, all things you usually experience in your teenage years. But that is ultimately what led to, I won't like camp there, but like that's ultimately what led to me realizing that like, just like most people who have chronic issues or concerns or health issues, you start realizing that the typical way that we tend to address them is sometimes just not working, and it's not enough. And I wanted to figure out a way to potentially heal myself. So I found nutrition through CrossFit, actually. And then that kind of guided my way into chiropractic. One of my bachelor's is in psychology. And so it'll come full circle here towards the end, which I find fascinating. But psychology and neuroscience was my original my original interest. And then chiropractic made such a big difference for me as far as migraines and health. It introduced me to functional medicine. So I thought like, okay, well, that'd be cool because you're working directly with the nervous system. And I thought that was really fascinating. So that's where I started. And then through that time, I also at the same time got my master's in human nutrition and functional medicine because I was just so passionate about helping people with their health and getting to the root of where it's all coming from, because that's what I wanted, like that's what I wanted for myself.
Right.
So then I took that, and then I realized as I was applying it in practice that there were a lot of people, including myself, that did all the things. They had the nutrition, they had the exercise routines, they had all of these things that we talk about, the protocols, the supplements, all that jazz, and still either had symptoms or they'd improved to a certain point, but still not quite that full 100%, or they weren't working at all. And then I was like, okay, like what is happening here? And that's when I started realizing that there is a subconscious component. There is a mind piece that is driving so much of the physical aspect in the physical body. And that's when I started exploring more of like neurolinguistic programming and subconscious reprogramming and brain rewiring, of looking at patterns, looking at false narratives and limiting beliefs, and looking at our emotions and stored negative emotions, and how all of these patterns of the way that we can be, like whether we're people pleasing or we are perfectionists, or we have our sense of self-worth tied to our achievements. Like all of these things are patterns that we have that can actually end up reflecting in our physical health, like autoimmune disease, endometriosis being a very dissociative condition specifically. These patterns, these ways kind of guided my journey for healing myself. And then they've turned into what I work with people on and around. So that's how we got here.
Now that's such a fascinating kind of backstory there.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I was excited to talk to you for the show is that I know that you have some background doing kind of some athletics that require
Yes.
a lot of mental toughness, and then now I know that you've been doing this as well. Um, what and then we talked about stuff that's bubbling up from the surface, both from an entrepreneur standpoint and from a motherhood, as you mentioned, standpoint.
Yes.
Kind of what is it that you're seeing that like where does that come from, or how can you explain that to somebody where it's like the physical is not, obviously it's physical, but
Yeah.
then what's your journey been like on those two fronts, really?
Yeah, so from like both from all of them, right? So like I am an Ironman, and I've done multiple 70.3 Ironmans, which is like half the distance of a full Ironman. But I also have done CrossFit, and I was an athlete like all of my life competing. So from that perspective, then also getting into business and being an entrepreneur, that was the first area really where I had to face a lot of my own patterns and my own beliefs and things that were it's a self growth journey. As soon as you decide you're going to go be an entrepreneur, like you get faced with all of your stuff. So that's ultimately where a lot of it started to come up, because I started realizing that like what I was creating was what I didn't want. I was like,
Right.
I wanted more. Which is funny in and of itself, because as soon as we're chasing more, then it turns into a whole other thing. And that again comes from root beliefs. But entrepreneurship has definitely been something where I've really had to face my own beliefs and my own blocks and barriers, and really look at who I am. And then parenthood does the same thing in different ways. Uh,
Right.
so, and I would say though, like in some ways, like the business side of it is something that you do choose, obviously, in both cases. You choose to become a parent, but I think what sometimes catches us off guard in all cases is that we don't actually realize like how much is going to shift and change for us. In many times the best of ways, it actually serves us quite well when we finally like say, okay, I'm up for this. But when we tend to fight that, it can be a little bit tricky and we end up where we maybe don't want to be. But yeah, that's how I really got into a lot of it, is that I started realizing that our mindset just guides so much of what we do and what we create. I mean, gosh, Ironmans in and of themselves are really a really the mental toughness is, and I mean, you've been doing a lot more like long distance sort of things as well, and Spartan races and all of that. Like they are as much as they are physical, they're mental for sure. Because your physical body will do what it does, but it's how you develop that mental resilience that really like guides how successful we are oftentimes in those races and what we believe to be true about ourselves. But yeah, I mean, I'm trying to remember what the specific question was, but that's
Just kind of, yeah,
yeah,
the mental, like what are some of the things that either revealed themselves to you
oh yeah,
emotionally, or that you now kind of
yeah,
turn and help people with in some of your
yeah.
coaching?
Yeah, totally. So, like how the mindset piece kind of dictates into the physical body. So, let's say I'm going to give you a specific example. Let's say we have let's in the functional medicine world, let's say we've tried a lot of things. So we've gone to see different medical practitioners. We've then gone to see these functional medicine practitioners. Oftentimes, along with that, we're seeing chiropractors, we're seeing acupuncturists, massage. We've tried a lot of different things. We've tried a lot of different supplements, maybe even tried doing it ourselves in many cases of like taking it into our own hands and doing our own research. And then we're, starting to look for all the things. Um, what can all of that, especially if it doesn't work, can lead to the development of, or we can be feeding into a past belief of that, like what we do or what we try isn't going to work. So if we are running and operating off of that belief of like all of these things have never worked for me, then what is the that's the reality that we're going to get, is that we're going to try a whole lot of different things and not get the results that we want because we're operating off of a belief that none of it works for us. So when we have that, then what translates into the physical body is exactly that. Whatever is going on there, whether it's GI, whether it's autoimmune, whether it's uh, I mean, any of the different functional medicine things we can be looking at, the body will literally be recreating the thing that we are thinking the most. So if we're consistently working off of that, that's one way. Another way that we can look at this too, that's maybe a little more tangible, is if you think of a time where you were like the most happy. Well, let's start with that one first. So the most happy, if we like close our eyes and think about the time where we were the most happy, you often can start to feel it in your body when you really step into that picture of like, this is the time when I was the most happy. And it spreads through your body. Similarly, if we think of a time when we were the most scared or the most anxious or we had the most fear, you can also tend to feel that in the body. And for some people who have a very visceral response to their emotions, like if you think about like going and walking on stage, almost immediately some people will be like, I have to go to the bathroom and I need to go like right now. And that is their body responding to those neurotransmitters, to those hormones that are felt by every single cell in our body. And it literally has a physical change in the body, right? So we automatically think the thing, we have the emotion, and then we get the sensation like, I got to go to the bathroom. It literally changed the GI tract and what it was doing and how it was operating. So when we have beliefs, when we have emotions that we're operating off of, or like we are people pleasers, or we're perfectionists, or we're we don't have very good boundaries, we can see things like leaky gut, we can see things like autoimmune disease that are because we are not taking care of ourselves in that sense. Is like perfectionism and people pleasing and all that are all patterns that have a tendency that we put a lot of other people ahead of us. And so then the physical body reflects a lot of that. Does that answer that question?
It does. I mean, it went in a way I wasn't expecting, because which, and I'm happy it did, because this is kind of related to two separate tracks. So one is where what you're referencing and what my wife has experienced in her practice, where she does all the physical for a while, and then there inevitably comes to a point where, all right, it's starting to be mental now. And, she later brought in a mental health therapist to kind of,
There you go. Yep.
help introduce them to that person in the practice, which is fascinating to me as a non-clinician. I'm like, that is insane. It's so connected. I think my question, I was expecting to hear like oh, the limiting beliefs hold us back, and it's really like a growth journey personally, to, for example, ask for money and,
Sure.
price your services accordingly, and
Sure.
put yourself out there. Even record a video and post it on social media, for some people is terrifying. So
It's
like
terrifying.
overcoming
I've
some
been
of that
through
stuff, right?
it.
Yeah, or starting a podcast is terrifying, and you might drag your feet for a couple of years.
Yes.
So yeah, no, that answers the question, and I'm excited to explore both sides of that coin.
Hmm.
um, what have you How have you tackled the mental physical connection with patients of yours, or
Hmm.
clients of yours, or in any capacity? How do you
Yeah.
get over that, or
Mhm.
how do you help them overcome the mental side so that their body can relax, or get to a state of healing?
Totally. So yes, and oh, that's a really key piece there is like get to that state of healing and like be able to be in that parasympathetic nervous system where we get to do that. Yeah, there's a couple of different ways, but what I find is it's really about finding resources, right? So like when we experience a health concern of some type, the typical thing that we're going to do is we're going to go see a doctor or a specialist of some type because like if I've got a sprained muscle, I'm probably going to go see either a PT, chiro, or massage, right? Like those are the resources that we typically know to go to. So when we're looking at things that are going on in the subconscious mind, as and or emotions are guiding a lot of it, we have to find resources for those things. So we have therapy, we have all of that. And I work a lot in tandem and in conjunction with therapists. But a lot of what therapy can do is be kind of still rooted in the conscious mind. Not all. I'm not saying any one is better than another. I think we all have such great resources that if everyone were to work together, like I mean including the medical field, I know we often, I'm going to just get on the soapbox for just a hot minute, but like even inside functional medicine, like we need the medical field to do what they do. So I'm not ever saying one way or another that somebody's better than another. It's just that, especially when we are looking at the subconscious mind, we also need to be addressing the root beliefs. So sometimes therapy doesn't always get to that, and that's fine. But my point here being that how we do that is we get to, and when we, resources can look like journaling. So finding like really good questions to be asking that help us really get clarity around it. Journaling is one way that can be really helpful. Meditation is another one that can be a really helpful tool. But also getting a little bit deeper. So how I work with clients is it looks a little bit like a conversation at first, where we're just, let's pick a problem that we have, and it could be a health problem or it could be a life problem. Like maybe we've experienced a divorce and now we're still sort of living in that victim mindset of how that all went played out, and we've now got some GI stuff, we have maybe some joint injuries, we have some other things that maybe we have a little bit of extra weight that we would like to be able to lose. But a lot of it starts with a conversation around like, okay, like what's going on in life right now, what are we struggling with, and then we start narrowing it down to where, what are we actually believing to be true here. So for example, like let's say we are in a place where we are chasing a lot of things. Like we want more money, we want more clients, we want more success, we want more um, time. Being a lot of them, right? And we're chasing a lot of these things, and we're looking for something outside of ourselves versus finding it within ourselves. There could be a lot of beliefs here around feeling like we are, and actually knowing that we are worthy. Like we actually could be operating off a belief that we're not worthy, that we don't deserve that. Or we could be operating off of a fear of success. We could be operating off a fear of failure, or both, right? Like that success in and of itself, like when you put yourself out there, you also open yourself up to other people who may not like what you have to say, which is
Yeah,
inherently terrifying
yeah.
because we want to be a part of a tribe. That's like one of the human things is it's safer to be a part of a tribe. So again,
And
like these are,
especially if you've grown up in an environment where you've had to adapt to be the
yes,
person that pleases others,
yes,
whether that's evolutionary or whether it's learned inside your tribal
Yes,
family unit and household unit.
exactly. Exactly. Or if we have like a belief that when growing up, we received love, we received what we needed because we were high achievers. We did
Right.
a lot and we were good at what we did. We received praise. That's when we heard, oh, I'm proud of you. Oh, you matter. Oh, you're significant. We get all of these needs met in an inside of achievement. So then what that ends up looking like is we're constantly chasing achievement, which ultimately for most women specifically, but also for men can, and inside of the health field specifically, can lead to a lot of burnout and overwhelm because we're doing so much without enough of that balance on the other side, and also without the purpose and the fulfillment of realizing that like we're worthy regardless of what we do, regardless of what we achieve, regardless of any of that. So this is like one of those ways that like those underlying needs and root beliefs and core beliefs that are created between when we're 0 and 7 years old, really they do get influenced later on by teachers and friends and all that through our teenagers as well. But like a lot of our core beliefs are set up during that first initial time at 0 to 8 years, 7 to 8 years old. And we're then going to be operating off of that. And that's how we can start to see these patterns play out in our life that give us the opportunity to then see like, oh, this is no longer working for me. And we get to then choose and decide to do something different. And how we do that is we can go back in time. We can clear beliefs and get learnings from the actual events that happened back then, which pulls the cord on where we've attached all of the things as we've grown up. And then we can choose something different. And then through integration and tasking and all sorts of fun things, we can then rewire that brain for something else that we want, which is such a cool thing to get to do. It's like I'm so passionate about it because it's the most fun thing to get to see people transform. I love it.
It is really fascinating to me as well because I have a surface level knowledge of this whole area. How do you identify something like that that's a core belief that doesn't serve you or has been
Mhm.
negatively affecting you, whether you know it or not? I mean,
Yeah.
most of us have gone through life and not been aware of these. I
Mhm.
need external validation, or I need to be achieving something, and we don't always know why. So how do you identify that? Is it EMDR or is it talk therapy or is it something else
So
entirely?
yeah, I mean, I think that's part of where it comes down to the coach in and of themselves. Like I'm a doctor, yes, but I kind of consider myself more of a coach in that scenario because
Hmm.
really what we're doing is we're like, let's say, it's mostly a conversation, honestly, right? So what we're doing is we're asking the conscious mind for what the problem is, but then through layers of questioning and just sort of exploring and going a little bit deeper, like we can start to map out where the root of the issue is. And again, it really like when we call it data mining in the sense of like when you talk like let's say we are talking about family. And when we're having this conversation about family, or we could say money, we could say, like, when I talk about this particular theme or issue that I'm having, I'm feeling very frustrated or angry because this is something that's happening right now and I don't like it. And then as we ask questions deeper, we can say, well, what specifically about it? Like, what are the stories that you're telling yourself? What are you making it mean? Like the fact may be the fact of what is actually happening in that time frame, but also realizing that like our brains are using those filters that we talked about and they're deleting, distorting, and generalizing all of the information based off of the filters that we have. So even what we seem to be like think is fact may not actually be fact, which is kind of like a mind mess. But ultimately, like what are the stories we're making it mean? So like if we're saying like, oh, not having enough money means that I'm not going to be able to get my needs met, or that I'm not going to be able to be supported, or that this business is going to fail. Okay, so then we take that and we go a step further of, okay, so what specifically is it that makes you think that this business is going to fail? And then we keep digging deeper and deeper and deeper. Now, people can do this on their own journaling. All you do is really just like dump the bucket of like, don't judge any of the thoughts that come up and just start journaling all the things around a problem that you have. And then when you go back and reread, what you might realize is through that process, like you can get some clarity on where some of the pieces are. Once we eliminate some of the fluff, we can see, specific emotions and things that were coming up, like frustration, or like, oh, that makes me so worried, or that makes me so anxious, or oh, I feel so guilty because of yada yada, then we can start to look at, so if this happens, then what? And those are where we start getting to the beliefs of like where we're operating from, and then we can shift that to something that we want instead, which I'm like, we can do this in a way that makes it faster. Like that's what we do in my side of my coaching. But the thing is this is how powerful the brain is, and why like affirmations and meditations exist, is because we can literally say like, I am worthy, I am enough, and not actually believe it. But if you repeat it enough times over time, you actually will start to believe it. It's the same thing as like, we can either be receiving things that we want or receiving things that we don't want. And like, if you watch TV, if you watch the news, if you watch, or if you listen to something for long enough, that like group think that happens is because you are essentially hearing something over and over and over again until the point that you actually believe it. So we can, again, do this in the way that we want, like, I know that I'm enough and I know that I'm worthy, or we could be receiving something we don't want. Either way, that it is that powerful that we can actually be, um, um, we can actually have control in that sense of like, well, what do I actually want to think? What do I actually want to believe, even if we don't actually believe it right now?
Yeah, and I am so excited about this conversation. I'm going to nerd out for a bit. I mean,
I
this
love it.
isn't new. This isn't really new stuff. I mean, I'm sure you
No.
know a little bit more about the science behind it
Yeah.
physiologically, but this has been around for 3,000 years,
Yes.
or 2,500 anyways. I'm reading the Daily Stoic, and I have a copy of Marcus Aurelius's journal, which is now called Meditations. It's really difficult to read, so the Daily
Mm,
Stoic actually helps make it a little bit more understandable for today's language,
sure.
and breaks it down. And it's the same thing. It's like from him all the way up through the present day, just different voices are trying to wake everybody up a little bit. And I don't
Yep.
say that like everybody's asleep, but most of us go through life unconsciously,
Yes.
just following our own patterns. And like we've all heard the phrase like there's nothing bad or good unless we make it so. And so it's
Yes.
like, what are we making
Exactly.
it mean, or what are we believing to be true here?
Yeah.
Is these assumptions that we might not even know are assumptions,
Hmm.
or we are skipping steps between here's an event that occurs and here's a thought around that event, and that thought leads to my feelings, and then when
Yep.
I feel this way I take these actions, and
Yep.
then what is the result I get? And
Yep.
so just identifying that pattern, and I'm using that one from the life coach school training that I have, and my
Yep.
wife is certified in it. It really opens your eyes up to kind of how to really challenge your own beliefs, which sometimes are the hardest ones to challenge,
Hmm.
because we've believed them for so long.
They are the hardest. Like,
And yeah,
because they're
right.
often tied to so much pain, right? They're
Yeah,
tied to pain. They're tied sometimes to trauma. They're tied to things like, even now, if we're living something that we don't want, that's painful. It sucks when like life is not doing what you want it to do. And this, I mean, like we could be talking about really serious things, right? Like it's not just like, oh, I don't have the clients I want, or I don't have the money that I want. Well, that also can be extremely painful, but also like
yeah,
we could be talking about health things that are like really hard. Fertility and infertility, like those can be extremely painful to go through. So like, I'm not like brushing over something that like it's hard, and it can be very very hard to look at this stuff, but and like when we do, it opens up a lot of opportunity to heal and to I don't, maybe there is some struggle and things that just sort of do exist in life, and that's kind of how it is. But we can really start to look at like, what is my relationship to that, and can I actually gain some meaning or purpose in the time that I'm in, like right now. So anyway, my 2 cents on that. But yeah.
yeah. And in doing my own work recently, as you've mentioned, through entrepreneurship and fatherhood and or parenthood,
Yeah.
is what I've learned is just that, like not seeking happiness from the actions of others, trying to bring it from within, and
Yep.
uh, being content with, all right, I do the things that I think are right, and I
Yep.
don't rely on anybody else for my own happiness. But I want to come back to
Yeah.
the journaling. So for somebody who, like me, has been told to journal for a long time, or you
Mm.
mentioned meditation, but you specifically, I wanted to touch on journaling because that might be easier for somebody who's reluctant to meditate.
Yeah.
And you mentioned just kind of letting it all go, writing whatever comes into your mind, and then rereading it. So, what are some takeaways that somebody could take if they wanted to start journaling, like in
Yeah.
order to start challenging some of these beliefs or being aware of even these assumptions they've made
Mm-hmm.
without being aware that they're assumptions and not facts? What would you recommend to somebody who's like, I want to start journaling. I've tried it once, but I never got it. So how could you
Yeah.
break that down into manageable steps for somebody?
Okay, well, I'll give you a couple questions to start with that
Okay.
you can just try, but also too, this is maybe where some of the listeners or readers can start looking for some different journaling like prompts or questions to ask. So like sometimes what you'll see are people will have freebies of like, here's my way that I journaled through this, or like, here's some questions that I had to work through in order to get to clarity around this specific thing. So you might be able to start like doing a little Google search around what you're looking for, and then maybe see if you can find some journal prompts that might be a good place to start. But let's just pick any problem right now for your listeners, like or watchers, viewers. Pick a problem that you have right now. Just one though, please, for this one.
I'll
Um,
give you one. I'll give you one.
okay.
The people in my area can't afford functional medicine, right?
Oh, yes. Okay.
Or
This
people will
is a
never pay
loaded
that.
one.
People will never pay that.
Yeah, people never, yes, and I've faced all of these
Hmm.
personally.
Well,
So
and I
the
bring that one up because
question,
it's the most common, or
yeah,
it's the easiest to identify mental block that I see. Because
yeah, I will tell you that like most of the time this is rooted in a core belief of worth and value. I'll tell you that. That's where we're headed. But people will, or we're looking at like lack and abundance mindsets, and we're also looking at how we view money as like we're taking from someone versus it
yeah,
being an energy. So that already right there is like, start looking at your money mindset, start looking for some courses that will help you change your mindset around money if this is you. But also, where are we tying in our sense of self-worth and value to money itself, and what we're either like what we're valuing ourselves and our work off of, and also that we're potentially taking from somebody else. So those are all things to like journal about already. Like if any sort of thoughts that come up for you around that, just like list those off. Like, what do I think about this? Like, what is coming up for me? Or like, if I think about charging more, what's the first thought that comes to mind? So let's start there. Okay, well, what specifically about charging more is making you feel this way? Like, whatever that emotion is for you. Like, okay, let's say it makes me nervous. Like, I get nervous like no other when I think about charging more money. And then on my sales calls, I get all weird.
yeah,
Like, I get so weird. Um, People are going to sense that, right? They're going to sense that energy shift. So then I devalue my work and I lower my prices because that's what I think people can afford. And then when I hear no, even to that, that's when I feel even worse. And all I want to do is be able to help.
right.
So, what specifically comes up for you? Like, what are those stories that you're telling yourself there? Getting more specific on what you think about it is the starting place. What are the emotions? What I've already listed off a few. There may be others. I might feel guilty for charging this much again, right? We're taking from somebody else, or I might feel like I have imposter syndrome because I don't feel like I'm good enough, or I don't know what I'm doing, or I feel like I need to be better, have more certifications in order to be able to justify and charge that. Again, like the reason I can speak to these is because I have worked through so many of them. Um, some of it through journaling, some of it through working with coaches, and taking a bunch of other programs to help me look at mindset and like what is underneath the surface of all these things that are going on for me. But this is, again, ask the specificity, like what is it specifically that I'm telling myself? What do I think about this? What do I feel about this? What do I see? What do I like hear when I think about this specific scenario? And then what are the stories that I tell myself? What are the stories? What am I making it mean? And then once you have that and we have the emotions, then it's okay, are there any other things here that I believe to be true about this? What do I believe to be true? Like, people can't pay it. Okay. What do I want instead? I want to believe that people will pay it. Okay. And then what do you need in order to make that happen? Well, I need to know that, like, what I do and what I have to offer is worth it. I guarantee you, if you're like pretty much all of the people who are probably listening to this in the functional medicine world, like, if you have the certifications and the things, like, you've got enough to be able to do it.
Yeah.
In most cases, people have plenty to be able to do it. Even I will say this, like, I truly believe that everyone has the capacity and the capability to actually run a business and speak from what their learnings are of their life. Like, I think everyone has a journey that could potentially turn into a course or some sort of business or some sort of thing. It's just that's not, maybe not always the path that is specific for that person. But if you're in business and entrepreneurship and you chose it and you chose like functional medicine or whatever, like, I truly believe people have what they need. They just need to know it for themselves and believe it.
Yeah, I think that's great. So asking specific questions and really just looking at it, and I would say putting words in your mouth, kind of going back to it and like saying, is this belief something that's actually happening? One
Yep.
thing that I picked up from a Dale Carnegie book, so
Yeah.
30s, 40s of the 20th century, was like How to Stop Worrying and Start Living was the title of the book.
Yes.
But like, what
Yes.
is what is the absolute worst case scenario if we go down this path? And
Yep.
then, am I okay with that? Or how likely is that really to happen?
Yeah.
And then working backwards from there has been super helpful. Like, what's the worst case scenario if I raise prices? Like, going back to this example, like,
Yeah.
okay, fewer people say yes. Okay, so then that just means what? Like, you can always, or I find that I
Right.
can
I get more
deconstruct it.
time.
Right. You get more time, or you just need more people in front of you. So
Yep.
if instead of 4 out of 10 people saying yes, you get 2 out of 10 people saying yes, that just means you need 20 people. So
Right.
4 out of 20 will say yes. And so
Right.
then it's just like, okay, well, now I just need to go get. So the steps usually will reveal themselves, right?
Yeah.
If you kind of break down, okay, that doesn't seem so bad. And
Yep.
then, all right, now I tackle the, uh, sometimes people will call it a problem, but I've learned to call it a
Yes.
challenge or a game or
Yes.
somehow
The words we
gamify
use are
business.
critical. Right. Yep.
Right. So take on the challenge of, all right, how do I get 20 people per month instead of 10 to walk through my door?
Yep.
And then there are a whole bunch of courses and stuff on marketing and people that help with that too.
Right.
And so, like, even if you don't have the skills yet, this is the golden age of learning new skills, because
Yeah.
if it's not on YouTube, it's in a course somewhere. And,
Yes.
sometimes they're free, sometimes you have to invest, and
Mm-hmm.
that's okay too. What's the worst case that happens? Even if for some of these investments that we've made, if we pick up like one or two nuggets, it's worth the whole thing.
Yep.
And
Or
so,
what you don't want to do or what doesn't work. Like, I see it as both. I've had both. I've had things that have worked really well and I have things that have kind of not worked well. And it's all, I, similar to you, believe that it's all worth it to me because I learned something. And that's what I try to find value in everything that I do.
yeah, right. Like,
Mhm.
and I think it was one of the Stoics who I recently picked up on this, but we've all been there. Like, someday you'll look back on this and it'll be a blessing instead of a curse, right?
Yep.
And so,
Yep.
that concept is 2,000 years old, and
Yep.
we just don't know what's what. And even if it is a curse, it makes you stronger for the next.
Yeah.
This sounds really trite, but it
Yeah.
does give you perspective and wisdom and resiliency for the next obstacle in your way,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, just as you said, like, there, I'm not saying that, like, I think a lot of people hear that, like, oh, this bad thing happened and it was for you, or it was like, whatever. Um, I'm definitely not saying that. Like, I recognize that, like, some things are like hard and they are life shattering sometimes. And I, what I believe in that case is that, like, where we have choice is how we choose to move forward. How do we choose to do we choose to learn, or do we choose to stay in it? Do we choose to move forward in a way that we are proud of? Do we choose to find the resources to help us heal? Do we choose to see this as an opportunity to learn? Like there's just so many different ways that we can look at it. I mean, I've been through plenty of hard times in life, but like when you are able to choose how you want to move forward from those things, then it kind of opens up more possibility and opportunities. And that's what this is all about. It's like when you get stuck in the like, I don't want to raise my prices, and you feel like it's a struggle to financially support your business, and you don't have enough time and like all of that. Like we can definitely get stuck there, and it can be hard. And so then how do we move through that? And one of the ways to do that is to look for possibility, just like you said. And when we look for possibility and we get out of that like fight or flight of like, I'm stuck here, we get into the parasympathetic nervous system when we get the emotions out of the body and we actually regulate our nervous system. And now the fear that we had is not as fearful. And we can see that like, oh, I never thought about this other opportunity, or, oh, I never thought about this other possibility, or, oh, affiliate marketing, or, oh, all these other things. And, then possibilities start to open up. And that's when we start to see the magic of letting the subconscious mind focus on what we do want.
Yeah, and I'm glad you kind of popped into that kind of framework of like these new things that are presenting themselves, because and I might be putting you on the spot, but do you find with some of the people you work with that a new opportunity like affiliate marketing is like, wow, this is exciting, this is brand new, and we like new things in our brains, and so we go for it, and then it's not as easy as it was made out to be by the marketing materials or the sales page or whatever it was. And then we hit like what I've come to learn is like the valley of despair. Like, oh shoot, this is hard. And then do you find that you have clients or patients that have continually hopped from uninformed optimism to, oh shoot, this is harder than it looks, and then just kind of hop to the next uninformed optimism, like during like this, just follow that same pattern over and over again without kind of pushing through and like, no, this is the path I need to take. As long as I stick with it, I will get better at this. It will take 20 hours or 40 hours or whatever it takes to achieve like some level of not mastery, but adequacy in any new skill or opportunity. What, there's a question coming, but
I got it already.
What have you seen to kind of combat that, or how do you focus that?
Yeah. So number one is like, again, the number one thing that I find to be the most helpful, and I tell to all of my clients is get patients and clients as clients, is get curious. Get really curious. So even in this scenario, like and this is the best thing, it takes all of the like shame and the guilt and the heaviness off of a lot of it, is when you're just able to take a step back and be like, okay, I've been course hopping, or I've been coach hopping, or I've been doctor hopping, or I've been doing all of these, I've been trying these new things over and over and over again, and I'm not really getting to the finish line on any of them. Why is that? What's happening there? What specifically is causing that pattern to be it? So yes, maybe it's I like the feeling of the new start. It feels good to like have a new beginning. And then what happens? What is the first thought? What's the feeling? What's those first initial strategies that come up that then cause you to jump ship? Because you're like, oh, it's hard. And, oh, I have to sit this out. Oh, I have to see this through. When you start to look at like everything that we do, everything that we have is a strategy, a habit, a pattern. All of it they're all strategies. So it's like when we go to the grocery store and we do all of our shopping, and then we come home and we're like, okay, and now I wanted to eat healthy, so I'm going to do all of the grocery shopping. And then now we get home and like, all I want to do is order in food. It's a strategy. So how do we shift the strategy to then be what we do want, which is to then cook the food? The same thing happens here, is like when we're looking at, buying these new courses and trying these new things, we have a strategy to get us out of the thing from doing the hard work. And so we can change and shift that strategy for something that we do want, which is that I see things through. I go through I put in the time, or I grit it out, in the sense of like, I do take the steps to finish what I start. All of these are just patterns. They're just things that we've learned. And sometimes this is where having a coach can be really helpful, because when you're in that valley is really where we have a choice. We've already started on the like, I want change, which started the whole process in the first place. And then when we get to that valley of despair, we have a tendency to want to be like, I want to go back to the time when things were just fine before I started to make the change. But the only way really out is through. So we've got to address the things that are coming up in that valley, so that then we can finally come up to what we do want. And then it's this sort of process that kind of just continues to stair step up as we climb the levels. But you have a choice of what you do, like, and when you do that. It's just when you decide you want change, then the brain's going to be like, all right, here are all the things that we need to do. And one of them might be looking at that like, oh, I don't grit things through, or I don't finish things out. So what do I need to believe, or what do I need to implement so that I see this out and I see this through?
Yeah, that's kind of bringing it back to like if the valley of despair is kind of like the larger picture, then like what is it that's causing me to jump ship at this point? Is
Yep.
it a limiting belief? Is it
Yep.
a fear of success? Is it a fear of failure,
Yep.
or something similar? So
Yep.
um, that's
It's just asking a question. If I were to know, what is it that is causing resistance here? What is it that I don't want to face? And remember too, like the subconscious mind, like 95% of our lived experience is our subconscious mind. 5% is conscious ish, or 3 to 5%. So like your subconscious mind is doing a lot of things underneath the surface. And when you're in that valley, like your brain is trying to keep you safe more than anything else. Your brain is trying to keep you safe. It's trying to conserve energy. It's trying to you know keep you in the place that it knows, even if the place where you want to get to is better in theory. It's going to choose the comfortable known than the uncomfortable unknown. So this is where that saying comes of like getting comfortable in the uncomfortable, which is very true, but also like trite, I think, in a way. But it's very true. When you start to realize you want to level up and you want to do a lot of things with your life and you want to be better and you want to get to learn the things, that's the ladder you're going to start climbing. And getting comfortable in that uncomfortable is really where it's at.
well, and that's great because it's good that you clarified that. Like safe does not always mean like safe
Better.
physically or emotionally. It just means
Right.
comfort with what you're already used to.
Yes.
And as far as like what has been helpful for me, or at least when I remember to do this, is understanding that there's going to be resistance, understanding that your brain is going to want to fight and go back to its known safety, even if that safety is something that's not good for you at all, without getting too deep into it. It's just kind of like relationships that are abusive, or relationships that are just negative for you in it overall, maybe not necessarily abusive, but you just, for me, reminding myself when I embark on something new, like there's going to be resistance.
Yep.
I'm going to want to quit, and that's okay. Prepare for it and then stick it at, like, reminding myself it will come. It's just my brain telling me that it's unknown and we don't know what we're doing, but everything is figure outable, to quote my good friend and mentor, Marie Forleo.
Love it.
And so just kind of like having that mindset of like, we can do this. It will be hard, and I'm prepared for the hard part. I think.
Yep. And we can rewire the brain in that sense of like everything is figure outable. If that's like the new belief that you want, we can get the learnings from where that original piece came up, and then we can set this new rewiring in place, and then work into and live into that. So it becomes a little bit easier to make those shifts. But this is also a way that anyone who's maybe not working with a coach can absolutely do this on their own. It's just thinking like, okay, I actually do want to believe that everything is figure outable. And so that's what I'm going to remind myself when I start to feel this emotion come up, like I want to quit, or this belief come up that I thought that I want to quit.
Do you have anything on like seeking out past experiences where this thing that we want to believe is true was true for us at one point? So like I see things through where like in the last 5 years, I've basically, saying to yourself, like, I have no evidence that I ever saw things through. I've been stuck in my dead end job or whatever, and I've always kind of hopped around. Do you find that it's helpful to say these things that we don't actually believe yet and
Yes.
trick ourselves into believing, is it more powerful to kind of like think of a specific instance where it was true at one point and show your brain evidence that it can be true or is true? Here's the evidence where it was true at some point and it can be true again.
Sure. There's two sides of that. One is that there's a first time for everything. So like,
Yeah.
let's say I've never made $20,000 in a day, or I've never made $20,000 in a month, or I've never made $20,000 in a year, for example. There's a first for everything is a great one to kind of like say to yourself if you really don't believe it. Like, or yes, we can start to collect evidence where in the past. Well, actually, here's another piece of that too. So we can either collect evidence in the past of where we did actually have it. So we were healthy, let's say. We had health, we felt really healthy, all those things. Like, yes, we can collect evidence of that time that it was true at one point and then see where maybe we created the belief that we weren't. Or the other part of that is that if we don't feel like we have evidence for that, we can map it over from somewhere else. So if we're thinking in the terms of like an area of our life as far as health goes, well, maybe we might be able to say, oh, well, like in relationships, I've stuck it out and that's worked well for me. And I'm still married, or I'm still in the same relationship, or I was in that relationship and it was healthy and it was good for 4 years or whatever. Well, in that area of my life, I did that. Or maybe it's in sports, like, oh, in athletics, I stuck it out. Like, yeah, there were plenty of times where I didn't want to keep going, but I did, and I kept doing it. So, okay, if I have the evidence there, how can I then map that across here? What are the things that I do there that are like my strategies for sticking it out? Can I map that over to this area where I keep wanting to quit?
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So I imagine you put out a decent amount of content through your website and your socials. What are those? If somebody wants to go deeper or at least just follow you, where can we find you?
Yep, they can find me at Dr. Kirsten on Instagram, Facebook. Where else am I? I also have a podcast. I have websites, but Instagram is where I tend to live a lot of my life. So at Dr. Kirsten is a great place to come over. And if you listen to this and you found something helpful or you had like a breakthrough, I would love to hear from you. So please send me a message. I'd love to hear how it went.
Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on. This is one of the reasons we started this show, to kind of dig into these sort of areas as well. I really appreciate you. For you, those of you that are listening and not watching, it's at DrKirstin.
Thank you.
Dr. Kirstin, Kirstin on Instagram and wherever, but primarily Instagram. Thank you so much, Kirstin Lauritzen, for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
What a great run with Dr. Lauritzen. Thanks so much for her to being on. If you want more information on her, and especially the course that I mentioned in the intro, she has a course about charging what you're worth, feeling worthy. You can go to junto.show/worthy and check that out. Otherwise, you can find her at Dr. Kirstin and all of the socials and drkirstin.com. Thanks. If you guys got any value out of this show, please share it with some of your friends and or subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcasts. Thanks. I'm Scott Rattigan, and until next time, see you later.